Hello everyone! Let's start our lesson for today with the story problem with the title How Far I'll Go. A family went on a trip. They traveled for 2 hours and reached 120 kilometers away from their home. If they will travel for 5 hours, how far away from their home will they be? For us to answer this problem, let us first analyze it. In here, we are asked to find how far away from their home will they be. So meaning to say, we are asked to find the distance that the family will be able to cover if they will travel for 5 hours. But this given alone will not help us solve the problem. Therefore, we have to look for other given that might help us solve the problem. And in this case, we have the family traveled for 2 hours and they were able to reach 120 kilometers away from their home. Now, how will we use this information to solve the problem? For us to solve this problem, we will have to apply the concept of direct proportion. You already learned what a proportion is. So for today, we'll focus on one of the kinds of proportion, which is direct proportion. A direct proportion is when an increase in one quantity causes the increase of the other quantity, or is when a decrease in one quantity causes the decrease of the other quantity. Now let's go back to the problem. Let us understand why we need to use the concept of direct proportion to solve this problem. Remember, direct proportion is when an increase in one quantity causes the increase of the other quantity, or when a decrease in one quantity causes the other quantity to also decrease. So let us first identify the quantities in this problem. Since the unit of measurements used in this problem are hours and kilometers, it means that the quantities we are dealing with are time and distance. So it is given that since the family traveled for 2 hours, they were able to reach 120 kilometers. Okay, and we are being asked the distance that the family will be able to cover if they will travel for 5 hours. So let's see. From 2 hours, we will increase the time of travel of the family to 5 hours. What do you think will happen to the distance that they will be able to cover? Will the distance decrease, or will they be able to cover a longer distance? Correct. Since you increase the time of travel, we expect that the distance that they will be able to cover will also increase. That means distance is directly proportional to the time of travel, because again, the longer the time the car travels, the further the distance it will cover. Or if the car will travel for a shorter period of time, we expect that it will cover a shorter distance as well. Okay. Now, for us to solve this problem, again, we will use the concept of direct proportion. So we can have our equation as 2 is to 100 equals 5 is to n. Or we can also use a table like this one for us to easily distinguish the relationship of the quantities we are dealing with in this problem. So again, the distance or the quantities we are dealing with are time and distance. And again, since the family traveled for 2 hours, they were able to cover a distance of 120 kilometers. Now we are being asked for the distance that they will be able to cover if they will travel for 5 hours. Okay, so again, we do not know yet the distance, so we'll write n in here. And for us to solve this kind of problem, we will just simply use cross multiplication. So we will multiply 2 by n and we'll multiply 5 and 120. So let's have it here. Again, we will use cross multiplication. So let's write 2 times n is equal to 5 times 120. We already learned how to solve this kind of equation in our previous lesson. So let's recall. 2 and n cannot be multiplied, so we'll just have 2 times n. Then 5 times 120, that will give us 600. To find for the value of n, we will just simply divide 600 and 2. And let's do that here. 600 divided by 2 will give us 300. That means the value of n is 300. Therefore, they will be 300 kilometers away from home if they will travel for 5 hours. Let's have some more examples. How many liters of gasoline would the car use on a trip of 120 kilometers if it uses 10 liters on a trip of 48 kilometers? Okay. Let us use a table like this one for us to identify if this problem deals with direct proportion or if the quantities mentioned in this problem are directly proportional to one another. Okay. Since we have here kilometers, one of the quantities is distance and the other one is gas because of liters, and it was also mentioned in our problem. Okay. So it is given that a 10 liters of gasoline or a 10 liter of gasoline will cover a distance of 48 kilometers. Now, the question is asking for how many liters of gasoline will be needed if you will have a trip of 120 kilometers. So again, we do not know this yet, so we'll put n into it. Okay. What do you think will happen to the amount of gasoline that will be needed if you will increase the distance that you will cover? Will it be more or less gasoline? Correct. You will be needing more gasoline if you'll travel a longer distance. Therefore, this one or our quantities are directly proportional to one another. And for us to solve it, we will do cross multiplication. Okay, so let's multiply 10 and 120 and n and 48. 10 times 120 is 1,200. And n times 48 is just n times 48. And for us to find the value of n, we will just divide 1,200 and 48. Okay. Let's try 2. 2 times 48, that will give us 96. Then let's subtract. We'll have here 4. Then we'll have 2. Okay, let's try 5. 5 times 8 is 40. 5 times 4 is 20. Plus 4, that's 24. That means the value of n is 25. So, you will be needing 25 liters of gasoline to cover a distance of 120 kilometers. Again, if you will cover a shorter distance, that would mean less amount of gas will be needed. And if you will travel a longer distance, it means more amount of gas will be needed. This one or these quantities are an example of direct proportion. Let's have another example. A carpenter receives 680 pesos for 8 hours of work. How much should he receive for 6 hours of work at the same rate? Again, let's use a table like this one to identify the relationship between the quantities mentioned in the problem. So we have here, if a carpenter or the carpenter will work for 8 hours, he will receive a payment of 680 pesos. Now the question is asking for his payment if he will be working only for 6 hours. Okay. Now what do you think will happen to his payment if the carpenter will be working for lesser number of hours? Will it increase or decrease? Very good. Since he will be working for less hours, it means his salary or his payment will also be less than 680. Therefore, our quantities here are directly proportional. That means for us to solve this problem, we will again use cross multiplication. So let us multiply 680 and 6 and n and 8. 680 times 6, that will give us 4,080. Then n times 8. For us to find the value of n, let's divide 4,080 and 8. We'll have here 5. Then we'll bring down 8. That will be 1. Then bring down 0. We'll have 0. There. So the value of n is 500. Therefore, the carpenter will receive 510 pesos if he will work for 6 hours only. So working overtime will give you greater amount of salary. And if you will work for lesser time, you will receive lesser amount of salary as well. This is again an example of direct proportion. Let's try another one. Sarah uses 14 bananas to bake 3 loaves of banana bread. How many loaves of bread can she bake if she uses 42 bananas? Again, let's use a table like this one. Okay, it is given that using 14 bananas will let her bake 3 loaves of bread. This time, if you will use 42 bananas, what do you think will happen to the number of loaves of bread she will be able to bake? Will it increase or decrease? That's right. It will increase, meaning to say the number of ingredients is directly proportional to the number of product that you'll be able to make. Okay, so for us to solve this problem, again, we will use cross multiplication. Let's multiply 14 and n and 42 and 3. We'll have 14 times n is equal to 126. For us to find n, we will just divide 126 and 14. And this will give us 9. Okay, so we'll have 12. Therefore, 9 loaves of bread will be made if Sarah will use 42 bananas. Again, less ingredients will give you less amount of servings, while more ingredients will give you greater amount of servings. And this is again an example of direct proportion. Let's try another problem. Regine is enlarging a photograph that is 8 centimeters wide and 12 centimeters long. The enlarged picture will be 12 centimeters wide. Now, what will be its length? Okay, so if you will enlarge a picture, okay, which is originally 8 meters wide or 8 centimeters wide and 12 centimeters long, and the width will be increased to 12 centimeters, what do you think will happen to the length of the picture? Will the length of the picture decrease or will it also increase? That's right. If you will enlarge a photograph, if the width increases, then the length should also increase because you will enlarge it. Therefore, it is an example of direct proportion. And again, for us to solve direct proportion, we have to do cross multiplication. So let's have 8 times n is equal to 12 times 12. Okay, 12 times 12 will give us 144. For us to find the value of n, we'll just divide 144 and 8. This will give us, okay, this will be 64 and 8. So the value of n is 18. Okay, so if you will enlarge the photograph, which is 8 centimeters wide and 12 centimeters long, it will be 12 centimeters wide and 18 centimeters long in the enlarged copy. So for a smaller picture, you will be needing smaller frame, and for a bigger picture, you will be needing larger frame. And again, this is an example of direct proportion. And that's it for our lesson for today. Good job, everyone. Thank you for listening.